guys, I don't feel so good. Something feels something feels wrong. Like Helldivers 2 is dying? No, it can't be. Clearly this handsome man with a cool little jawline and some interesting merchandise in the back. He must have some idea on it. Let's find out. A Riot React special, by the way, for everybody. Have fun.
About Helldivers 2 and the current state
Okay.
of this live service. The game launched to huge success.
Damn right it did.
Sony's most
phenomenal game. I still play it.
Service that they themselves have kind of published.
Yep.
Obviously, Bungie is now part of PlayStation, but Bungie was not a PlayStation entity before its acquisition.
Do we have to bring Bungie into everything? Like, can we stop shilling them as these gods in gaming that just figured everything out just because after, I don't know, 10 or I don't know how many years at this point anymore, after God knows how many years now, we finally, they figured out something. And let alone their Fire Team Finder is still in beta, but I digress. Oh, shit.
So Helldivers 2 represented a big deal for Sony and PlayStation.
Sure did.
And currently the game, you know, it's lost a significant portion of the player base. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that this game is like tanking and, you know, that it's going to fail or anything.
But you made the title look like that, saying that it lost 90% of its players since launch. So you're saying, well, guys, I'm not saying that they're like losing 90% of their player base and tanking it, but they kind of are. Didn't I say this is my default browser already? Ugh.
But looking at numbers, it has lost roughly 90% of its player base, and there are questions as to whether this is a live service that can maintain itself.
They've lost 90% of their player base. And you know what my answer to that is? So fucking what? I'm not frozen. I'm genuinely asking that question. So what? Wow, they lost 90% of their player base. They've been in existence for several months now with no crazy major content updates except for some good patches here and now and then. Why are we surprised? Like, am I supposed to raise my apocalyptic flag of surrender and stop playing the game? No, I'm gonna still keep playing it. But again, why is this a surprise? And then talking about like the validity of live service. Now, I know that there's a whole bunch of stuff about the country still being banned, and that's an issue. Arrowhead, if you are listening, Sony, if you are listening, which I'm pretty sure you're not, if you are listening, please fix that. I'm sure there's a pretty decent amount of players that would love to buy the game again over that technical issue that y'all had with Sony trying to do the PSN crap. Let them buy the game again. Let the people enjoy the game. I digress, though. I don't really think that contributed so much to this 44,000 24-hour peak that I'm seeing here that people are thinking. Like, people are saying, like, there are some people online that are saying that is the reason why the game is like less than 10% of that's about 10% of their players left and all that, as if the countries that are even banned were even contributing to half of it. But again, maybe I'm wrong. That's just my own thoughts personally.
For the long-term future. Now, looking at the numbers, like the fact that it's still getting, you know, roughly 45,000 players.
That's what I think too.
That's still like not bad.
And I did see a little bit of Asmongold's video on this. He did make a good analysis on how like games like PoE, they'll like fall off, or Diablo will fall off and gain a height increase back in their player base again, just because they have a seasonal model, which Helldivers kind of has, but not really. I guess with a Warbunch, you kind of argue it. But even with that argument in itself, it's still impressive that despite having no quote-unquote seasons, they still have maintained a decent amount of players. And I think having 10% of your players that are strong and dedicated is better than just having a big skyrocketing soar like power, having a 2 million peak and now having less than like 40K. I'm pretty sure it's higher right now though because of DLC, but you get what I mean.
bad at all. Obviously, a far cry from its initial all-time peak of 458,208 players. But this is by no means doom and gloom. But at the same time, a live service, the goal is usually to maintain a certain player base and see that kind of become a steady pace of...
Not entirely true. I think that, yes, there might be some merit to that. But like a game like, I'm going to bring up Path of Exile. If they want to maintain their player base and have it really high, then we would have seen, and I'm not asking for this in PoE 1 because I already know why it's not possible. We would have seen all these like quality of life features that we're getting in PoE 2 already in PoE 1, like making respecing easier and like making melee better, which is almost impossible because of the way their character rigs are programmed and all that. Jonathan Rogers explained this very well in his interview with Josh Trapeze. But yeah, it's kind of true, but also again, like some companies really do just care to a very small amount of their player base, the ones that are going to spend the money and just put time into inflating their statistics.
Of players that eventually also kind of increases over time. There should be like an ebb and flow.
Yep.
When a live service starts to see a consistent trend of kind of the player base diminishing, there are some potential concerns as to
I guess
whether it can maintain itself for not just months on end, but years on end. And so questions are being raised about that. You look at something like, Destiny 2, which is one of the most successful live services out there.
Can we stop? Like, I'm sorry, you can go at me for having a hate boner for this game, but can we stop giving it this glorious pedestal that it is this pioneer of live service, a game that markets itself as free to play when it is anything but. It is more free to try than anything, where until recently you were confused like crazy on what to even buy. Astrocross has a video on it about it being a microtransaction hell. Are we really going to talk about how Destiny is now this again this pioneer just because they're final DLC, the final shape, the final conclusion of Light and Darkness Saga? Who would have thought that would have the most crazy amount of retention? No shit. But now we're using that as a metric. Again, I'm not harping on final shape, so to say. Like, it was a good DLC. It was, for the most part, at least on a base level, pretty worth it. I have some debate on if the episodes are, though. It's kind of iffy. We haven't seen everything. But can we just stop ignoring all of the flukes of Destiny 2, from the bugs to the encounter design to the dumb nerfs and buffs they've even had? Like, you guys know I've explained it all before. I had a whole video on nerfs and buffs in gaming that I have on the channel as well. If you have to look at that, you can. So again, just this is not related to the video at all. Just a really terrible nitpick I have of people just bringing up Destiny 2 as this metric of fucking godhood, because by that logic, really, we should be putting World of Warcraft, even though World of Warcraft only caters to the 0.2% of their player base, despite having a really, really crazy amount of players.
And in many cases, sort of the blueprint of what a live service looter shooter should be.
Anybody making a live service looter shooter, do not use Destiny 2 as a blueprint. Do not. Now, if you want to use it as a blueprint in terms of like how the weapons get perks and all that, yeah, sure. But do not, because what you're going to end up doing is changing your weapon meta around randomly, which I guess it's not really a problem, but you're going to go from having one system, then changing to a double primary and a heavy system, which was weird. Then you're going to change to having crafting be a thing to avoid RNG, but then making everyone solely rely on crafting. Then you're gonna, I don't know. I'm losing my point on this. Point is, don't use it as a blueprint, because it's a whole lot of this, contradicting decision here, contradicting decision there. We want to cut the grind, but we also want to increase the grind here where it's unnecessary. Moving on.
You can see right here that it started at a peak of 292,000 players, and you can see how that's fluctuated up and down. But aside from like some really major dips here and there, like this recent dip into the 30,000s, you can see there's this nice ebb and flow that highlights that people are still coming back to this game. And
well, of course, I mean, it's a AAA game. The game has a history and a huge community of it since Destiny 1. Why are we even comparing the two? Helldivers 1 was such a niche title. Why are we comparing Destiny 2's climb to, I'll call it what it is, their success with their player base, when this is a game that has been cooking for years and years? And again, you can say that Helldivers has been around for a long time. Helldivers 1 was a fundamentally different game. Destiny 1 and 2 are also somewhat fundamentally different, but they're still both first-person looter shooters.
In the last 30 days with the launch of the final shape, I mean, that player base has utterly exploded. I believe. Yes,
again, because of Light and Darkness Saga.
We're seeing peak players almost peak again. The last time we saw it peak was all the way back in February of 2000 and, or sorry, was it January? No, February of 2023 at over 316,000. We almost reached that number.
And what a peak that was in 2023. A peak of fucking disaster. Let's also not forget all the times that Destiny 2 is just incapable of running servers properly. And we can give them all the excuses of, oh, they're a company, what company doesn't have problems? Well, I'm sorry, if I spend $100 on DLC, I want my shit to be accessible day one. I'm not obligated to care. Especially when every single year it's been an issue, sometimes more of an issue than before as well. You would think that in an instance like with Final Shape, with how bad the servers were day one then, that Bungie would expect with, them bringing it into the light, bringing everybody back into playing the game, he would expect to have a better server load. No, they didn't. Why? Because, well, screw you. You gave us some money already.
Again, with the launch of the latest expansion. So that highlights just this level of consistency.
Still good expansion for Final Shape, but still
is alive and well and healthy, and that people will go back to if the content additions are substantial, and people have been really happy with
like every other game
Shape turned out. So I guess the question is, what does the future hold for Helldivers 2? Because this is a game that has released consistent updates, but it feels like those updates, in terms of bringing players back in a significant way, hasn't moved the needle by a whole lot. And
that's fair. I mean, you got to remember, most of the content updates might just be slight additions to game modes. The planets are relatively similar, but there's some uniqueness too with some of the jungle lands. And a lot of it's just kind of flooded by like good patch notes, bad patch notes. So you can call them updates, but I wouldn't really go as far as to call them like major content updates. Now, are they updating the game and keeping an eye on it? Yes, of course. But to sort of compare like that definition of an update in Helldivers, like what would be like a normal update or an overhaul in another game, I don't think it really adds up personally.
And news outlet Forbes highlights here this article from Paul Tassi, some statistics that are worth looking at about the game, like the fact that it's routinely outside the top 10 list and is number 58 in top sellers on the service, specifically referring to Steam, which is what we have a lot of data on. And then when it comes to the game being streamed, the most viewed Twitch stream of the game at this moment has 56.
And again, it's because the game lacks major core content. Actually, I'm curious right now what that statistic is.
I'm not even EA, it's literally me.
So I can sort it. I mean, yeah, I guess it's kind of low. But still, having not as crazy high viewership on views on Twitch isn't always so bad, Some of these smaller creators get a chance to shine a little bit. With my Twitch channel, I got a decent sizing of my Reza, how are you, my friend? I see that you are watching at the moment. Awesome. To anyone on YouTube watching, I'm live on Twitch as well currently. But just to kind of look at it at the moment, like this gives a chance for small creators to really shine. I got a decent size of my follower chunk from playing last Epoch in early access, like about a month or two before the game came out. So I got some traction there. So yeah, I guess it's not good for the game, but hey, I mean, if you're a new content creator and you want to get up on that ladder a little bit and pop your stream out, now's a good time.
The kind of social media
A tangential point, by the way, but just one I thought should be made.
Data also matters too because that highlights how much people are interacting
خوبی مرسی
with
خوبم
the
الحمدلله.
game and how much it's drawing eyes to this day, and those numbers are diminishing as well. Not to mention that there are some complaints surrounding.
Ooh, I have a
the current state of
follower.
The game. Again, it's not like the game is an utter.
Mr. Ayers, thank you for the follow, or I should say in Farsi. مرسی که فالو کردی کانالمو. انشالله که همه چی خوش بگذرونه با کانال من یه کانتنت کریتور خیلی جدید هستم، دارم هنوز سعی می‌کنم یاد بگیرم همه چی، ولی انشالله که شما بتونی کیف بکنی با حرفایی که من دارم میزنم. ولی بیشتر وقتا حرفام بیشتر از ویدیو من روی انگلیسی هست اگه مشکلاتی نیست. I'll just turn the one gentleman who just followed me, thank you for the follow and just, welcoming him.
But people do wish for certain things to improve. Players most recently have been complaining that higher levels were too punishing to be fun, but after a large-scale buff patch, it barely moved a needle.
Again, because altering difficulty isn't really going to change anything. Like, some people will like it, some people don't. It's not really a content change. Yes, you're making it more accessible, and that's all nice, but if you're making survival, let's just for example, if level 7 is now, if the new level 9 is the old level 7, I was already playing the old level 7, I'm not really getting much development playing now versus before as much satisfaction, because yes, I'm getting my rewards quicker. Merci, inshallah. But anyways, as I was saying, that's not going to really move the needle on me enjoying the game as much. I mean, yes, I'll be more happy that I'm getting better rewards, but that's not really going to change anything. So I think that's a bit more expected.
That, like I said, certain updates that feel pretty major have not caused a huge resurgence of players. There's been no significant surge other than a brief spike when a mass automaton invasion happened, but interest fell sharply after a week, and since then the game has continued to shed players.
Yeah, I mean, that's normal. Yeah,
service. That's the main thing. If this were like a single player experience or even a multiplayer experience that has sort of a beginning, middle, and end and isn't meant to be played for years on end, then these statistics would be fairly normal.
The thing is that because a lot of people like enjoying Helldivers 2 in increments, like it's not a game you want to really go sweat on, I think this point also kind of falls a little short and void, because there's a lot of people that, are occupied with other games, and they'll play the Helldivers 2 like once a week and they'll enjoy their time out of it. So I don't think this is really a point you could really make. One other thing that I don't think anybody's really talking about is, are we forgetting that there's a big Steam sale right now? And so people are putting their money in games that are almost 90% off. Can we stop forgetting about the fact that Elden Ring DLC just came out about a week ago and people are going crazy over Shadows of the Erd Tree? Like, you got to remember that if I have a library of games, if I'm playing one game, I'm taking hours away from another game. So with all these games getting all these crazy big updates, I honestly don't even think that you can omit the fact that them having those updates could also contribute to the fact that Helldivers 2's player count is low. Because again, the game's a little stagnant right now, don't get me wrong, even though it's still pretty fun. But I bet you a lot of those old players are playing Elden Ring right now, even if it is a fundamentally different game, or they're trying other stuff out. Hey, they might be playing Deep Rock Galactic, which is now $9 on Steam. A very, very worthwhile buck, by the way, for what you pay for. And that's also like a co-op little shooter and all that. So again, I think it's just factors that we're not accounting for. But again, I don't think this guy's like intentionally like doing anything malice, but I don't know. I agree with some of his points. I disagree with some of them.
But this is a game that is getting consistent updates, that a recurrent amount of money is being spent on by
That's also true.
And by Arrowhead. and so requires a certain consistent amount of financial return every quarter and whatnot. And there's the question of, will this game have enough financial returns to justify
I think it will.
its maintenance over the long term? As for why people are potentially dropping out of this game currently, well, Paul Tassi, again, he's the one who's been kind of covering this a lot. And looking at some of the comments, it's interesting to see what people are saying. Some people are theorizing that maybe Sony forcing the whole linking to a place.
I don't know much about the situation either. I have heard a lot of things about the social media team on Discord being very toxic, and that could also be like an issue in hand too. I don't know much about it. If this really is as true as people are saying it is, Airhead, you need to get on top of that. This is an interesting comment though. Power losing 90% of his fan base through such big expansion, only increased by a little bit, and the game is still successful. I agree. Bring a new expansion or faction, and just don't think too much about crazy numbers. You don't need to have gigantic, crazy numbers. Have a decent amount of numbers and keep them consistent. You gotta know the people that are gonna play the game. First, you gotta know that you want people to play the game for a long time, if that's your intent. And then you gotta have a good model to keep that possible. The war bonds are a good way of doing it to some degree. Although, like I said, I don't know much about it, if it's really as much of a grind as people say. If so, make that system a little bit better. But I already talked about that in a previous video.
PlayStation account, that whole debacle that spread far and wide, that they eventually had to back.
Oh, and also, I also agree that they're mostly developing. I mean, we already know the Illuminator are coming back. And when the Illuminator come back, I'm pretty sure the player base will jump up again. And I think a lot of that depends on how unique they make the Illuminate. If they make them as crazy as they were in the first game.
That might have contributed to a lot of players deciding to leave. Now, Paul Tassi, and looking at Steam charts.
Actually, I think what they need to do is, before they launch that update, let's say that the next update is about the Illuminate, they actually should drop it a little bit earlier, but add little hints. So one example I brought up before was with the Meridian black hole. Imagine the Illuminate are coming out of that. You should make like some random small patrols of Illuminate show up on Terminid planets, either fighting the Terminids or working alongside. I don't know the lore exactly how that works. Have them show up. Don't tell anybody about it. Just put it in the game and see what will happen when someone says, "Oh my God, what the fuck is that?" Then Reddit blows up, then YouTube blows up, then Twitch blows up, then people start making videos about these patrols. Then you have all the theory tubers start talking about, what does this mean for the game? Like, you gotta build up hype too. In Arrowhead, I hope you do it.
That when you look at the day in which this whole debacle happened back in May of 2024,
this is a terrible time, by the way.
The Steam data there, you can see that it didn't really impact the game a whole lot. It wasn't like we saw a huge crash of players around that period. You can see that the decline has been steady all throughout this controversial time period for the game. It definitely damaged the optics surrounding the title.
That's true.
They, I guess.
My biggest gripe with the game, by the way, I'm just going to be honest with you, is the constant instability of the engine. That's one thing that I actually would like to argue might be the biggest killer for me in the game. If there's one thing I have a problem with, is how inconsistent this game runs. Like, I'll go from having 150 frames sometimes I've launching, I'll have 60 frames. I have a pretty decent computer. I have a mostly AMD system, but I have a 7800 XT processor and also the 60GB XT 700 AMD graphics card as well. So I should be able to run a game like this quite well, but from the frames being inconsistent to the amount of random crashes, like, that's a big problem. And you guys, like, that's one thing I cannot defend. Please address that. Fix it however you can. It's getting a lot better on the crashing end, but you guys have got to do something about the way the game renders, perhaps addressing if there's any memory leak issues, and overall optimizing more around AMD, because Sometimes it ain't it, Chief.
backpedaled on it quickly enough, though there are still restrictions when it comes to which countries can access the game. But in terms of a pure PR perspective, they did do enough damage control where this
Also
didn't
true.
impact the game's numbers tremendously. Others are saying that in terms of the kinds of activities and content you partake in with the game is starting to get a little stale after all.
It's also true, and that'll come with time.
I love the game, but it's still fighting bots and bugs on nearly.
This is a big one. And they've had some hints too about the Xbox launch too. I remember someone asked Pyle said about that and about if Xbox was coming, and he replied to that individual with the gif about the clone army, which was like, what was it, 100,000 units ready with 100,000 units ready to deploy with 1 million more on standby. So I don't know if that was a joke or if they're seriously working on trying to get an Xbox launch. An Xbox launch will really put this game, like, it'll shoot it up, and maybe that'll motivate them to fix some things too.
The same planets with slightly different guns. I love the game, but for live service, it's too shallow. Once I maxed out every ship upgrade, I had nothing to work.
I would agree on this, but the new Warbond is really good.
Like, there's an incredible foundation here. It just, as a live service, it needs to be more developed. It just needs significant more content additions. And, you know, it's been getting some cool content here and there, but we're not talking about like expansion scale levels of content and campaign experiences and modes and stuff like that. And so I'm curious as to what's being worked on behind the scenes for Helldivers 2 to maintain its live service.
I wish I knew. And Arrowhead, if you guys want a random nobody to test that game out, play it, want to tell me all the secrets, what y'all got going on, I won't tell us, so I'll sign some NDAs. I really, really would love to get my hands on what y'all are doing and give some honest feedback about it. And I'll tease my viewer audience about it a little bit too, but of course I won't go into full detail per whatever contract you decide to give me, but just putting myself out there, man. You guys want to cook? Let me be the judge and taste it. Whatever it is you're cooking, of course.
I really do think that Helldivers
Man, I'm hungry.
does need, like,
I could use some butt engine right now.
Level of an update. It's why Warframe, for example, has continued to rise in its status and player base number.
But you also gotta remember Warframe is also very free to play. Yes, there is a whole money market with microtransactions and the frames and all that, but still, free to play game, people will naturally play it just because of that. And the game has also had a lot of free updates and crazy updates over the many years. So I don't know if he's like using this to make like a comparison, or if he's saying like, hey, Arrowhead, you guys should like look at Warframe. You know what? Look at Warframe actually as a base for their growth.
Every time they release a major content for Warframe, it feels like they basically add a whole new game mode. It's just the additions are so substantial that it feels like a completely fresh game all over again. It's like a fresh new addition on top of all of the good things that came before. And I think if Helldivers 2 can do that, I think there's still a chance for this game to come back, because again, the foundations are solid enough that
I agree.
If you give players a reason to come back to this, they will. It's also worth noting that it takes a lot.
But again, the game's gotta be stable. But I cannot stress that enough. Your game's gotta be stable on a performance level. Either hire some new people, or that's a terrible way to say it, or the people that you guys have, get them on fixing that, because that seriously needs help. Doesn't matter how good your content's going to be. If I can barely launch the game, that's problematic.
To make expansion levels of content additions, especially when you weren't expecting that your game would reach a level where it might require that, because the player base turned out to be significantly larger than you ever anticipated as a development studio. You know, we've seen reports of Arrowhead saying that their plans have significantly shifted after seeing how successful this game became. And so the team has likely grown, and there's likely just a lot more. There are likely much bigger plans for this game than there were before. And hopefully, once they get into the rhythm of that, we'll see a consistent cadence of substantial content releases that makes the game consistently feel fresh over the long term.
Fair.
And so I don't know. I'm personally not too worried about the future of this game unless we start to see nothing come out for this game or nothing refreshing enough for this game to be able to really recover from what is currently a pretty consistent dip in players and a pretty consistent decline. But this is far from hopeless when it comes to it making a comeback. I really want this game.
Fair. You did kind of bait me a little bit though, Mr. Young, with that title. So I don't know. You try to get my attention, you sure got it.
To continue its success because I think its model, both in terms of its consumer friendliness, aside from the whole PlayStation Network linking situation, and just what a passion project this feels like, and just how deserved this game is in its success. I really don't want this to become an example of failure. I want this to become an example of like what can happen when
we've had enough failures already with games.
Try to just copy others and kind of really have unique ideas and take a genre and kind of do your own thing with it instead of chasing trends. You kind of do have your own unique take.
Make the trends.
On top of the fact that you monetize it in a way that feels ethical, the cheaper price point for this game combined with monetization that doesn't feel too in your face and like you're getting too locked out of substantial desirable content.
True. All the crazy things that gamers want that other games don't have, Helldivers 2 has. So it's like, it would be such a darn shame if it just couldn't get its feet together because of all these random like inconsistencies. It's like if you're really perfect at your job, but you're always late. Like that would be such a terrible way to get fired. Like, oh my God, you show up to work, you always get your work done. You are the model example of how you should do everything. You're the most productive, but you get fired because you're late all the time. Regardless of how productive you are and how much you make up for it, you getting fired for being late. And I feel like that's it. Like, I guess what he's saying is like, Helldivers, don't get fired just because you're being late. All these other companies, man, they do way worse things. And they eventually get fired. They'll get fired for that, or they won't even. Don't get fired for something small.
Like there's a lot that this game gets right, and hopefully it's something that will be continued by developers in a way where
I'm hopeful about that too.
Example of how to do a live service right, but only time will tell. Until we see more of what the future holds for this game, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Helldivers 2, whether you're still playing this game, and if not.
So overall, a good video. If anyone's watching this or wants to check out Young, I don't know how to say his name. Take a look at his channel, subscribe. I should probably enable notifications on that one. And yeah, I guess it's the end of the video, guys. I'm probably gonna stream a little bit later. If you like this video, please feel free to leave a follow on my Twitch channel or subscribe on my YouTube channel. Also leave a like on that video too. It lets me know y'all want to see more. Until later tonight, this is the Raya signing out. Peace out. Take care, y'all.